The most terrifying fighter in the galaxy swore he'd snap her bones one at a time. 5 minutes later, he was the one being hauled out on a stretcher. Yeah, that actually happened. I've seen my share of idiotic decisions over the last 17 cycles, working as a combat coordinator on Station Nexus 7. I've watched Blentherian nobles gamble away entire family fortunes on matches that were obviously rigged. I've seen Vork-willed berserkers rip through reinforced plexosteel using nothing but their claws. I even once witnessed a Matherian diplomat accidentally challenge someone to a death match because he completely misunderstood our translation software. But none of it, came close to preparing me for the day Kharvak the Unyielding decided to step into the arena against a human. Let me rewind a little, because without the proper context, what happened next just doesn't land the way it should. You need to understand exactly who Vrikr was. He wasn't just another warrior looking for credits. No, not even close. Vrikr was a legend, a living myth, a natural disaster that walked upright, wrapped in scales and fueled by pure ego. He stood just under 8 feet tall, which is impressive even by Krothian standards. His species evolved on a brutal high-gravity world where nearly everything either wanted to kill you, eat you, or do both in whatever order was most painful. As a result, Krothians developed thick, armored hides capable of shrugging off most small arms fire without much trouble. Their muscle density was strong enough to bend duralloy bars. Their reflexes had been sharpened over countless generations spent surviving predators that made our worst nightmares look like harmless pets. And Vrikr? He wasn't average for his species. He was elite. 43 professional fights, 43 wins, 27 of those ended in first-round knockouts. The remaining 16 didn't go much longer. Those opponents were smart enough to surrender before he outright killed them. By that point, the galactic combat arena on Nexus 7 had basically become his personal domain, his playground, his throne room, his private shrine to violence, and I'll admit, the arena itself was impressive. 300 feet across, fully enclosed by energy shields rated to contain a small tactical nuke. The floor could be reprogrammed on the fly to simulate anything from jagged rock fields to zero-gravity combat. Seating for 12,000 spectators from across known space, all of them yelling, betting, drinking, and behaving like civilized sapients who'd temporarily forgotten what civilization was supposed to mean. That day, the place was packed. Word had gotten out that Vrikr was accepting open challenges again. He did that whenever boredom set in, which, judging by his track record, was pretty often. He stood in the fighter preparation zone, all 8 feet and 600 pounds of him, daring anyone foolish enough to step forward. The reward was 50,000 credits and bragging rights across 3 star systems. The price was your pride, several broken bones, and possibly your life, though Vrikr usually stopped short of outright murder. Usually, I was managing the betting pools that shift, which meant I had a perfect view of everything. Vrikr was holding court like he always did, massive arms folded across his chest. His tail swayed slowly behind him, that particular Krothian motion that screamed smug satisfaction. His hide was a deep crimson, crisscrossed with white scars from dozens of past battles, and all 4 of his eyes scanned the crowd with open disdain. "Come on," he bellowed, his voice booming through the arena's amplification system. "Is there no one left with even a shred of courage? Has this station become nothing more than a shelter for cowards and weaklings?" The crowd ate it up. They always did. Vrika didn't just sell violence. He sold a performance. That was when she walked in. At first, I barely noticed her. She was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with a slim frame. She wore basic training clothes that looked old and well-used. Her skin carried that familiar brown tone you only see from Earth's ridiculous genetic variety. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. No weapons, no armor. Nothing about her suggested she was anything other than a spectator who'd wandered somewhere she didn't belong. But she didn't stop. She walked straight past security, straight past the registration desk, and kept going right toward the arena floor. Iris said beside me, my Regalian assistant's tentacles twitching nervously. Is that a human? Looks like it, I answered, already feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Humans were still new to the galactic scene. They'd only cracked faster than light travel about 30 cycles earlier, which made them infants by interstellar standards. Physically, they were small, soft, fragile. They came from a moderately dangerous world that nobody had taken very seriously. Sure, they reproduced like xanthian moss and spread through star systems at an alarming rate, but when it came to raw combat potential, they ranked near the bottom of the list of species you really didn't want to fight. Somewhere between planarians and Geffic, which is to say, almost nowhere. Vrika noticed her at about the same time the rest of us did. Then he laughed. It was deep and booming, rolling through the arena like thunder. "Is this a joke?" he shouted. "Did someone hire entertainment? Because if this is a comedian, I want my credits back." The crowd followed his lead. Laughter swept through the stands. Betting terminals lit up as spectators scrambled to wager on how fast this would be over. The odds were absurd. I checked the numbers. 300 to 1 against the human, and that was us being generous. According to the registration data flashing across my display, her name was Elena Navarro. She didn't react to the laughter, not even a little. She just kept walking. When she reached the edge of the arena floor, she stopped and looked up at Vrika with an expression I can only describe as mild curiosity, like she was inspecting a dull piece of furniture. "I accept your challenge," she said. Her voice was calm, quiet, completely disconnected from the roaring chaos around her. Vrika stopped laughing. He tilted his massive head, studying her the way you might examine an insect that had just surprised you. "You?" he said. "You accept my challenge?" "That's what I said," she replied. "Yes," Vrika said slowly, his tone dripping with condescension. "Little human, do you have any idea what you're doing? I will break you. I'll shatter every bone in your fragile body. You'll spend the rest of your short life drinking your meals through a tube." Rebecca just shrugged. "The rules say any registered sapient can challenge," she said. "I'm registered. I'm sapient. So either fight me or admit that this whole tough guy act is just empty posturing." Oh, the crowd absolutely lost it. Laughter flipped instantly into cheers, mixed with a healthy dose of jeering. Nobody talked to Brecker like that. Nobody. His hide darkened several shades, shifting to that deep, angry red I'd learned to recognize over the years. That color meant rage was bubbling right under the surface. "Fine," he growled. "Your funeral, literally." Rebecca turned toward my booth. "I need to register my bet." "Your what?" "My bet," she said evenly. "I'm allowed to bet on myself, right?" I blinked, all 6 of my eyes. "Technically, yes, but Good. I want to put 5,000 credits on myself. Straight win, not just survival. The arena went dead silent. 5,000 credits at 300 to 1 odds meant that if she somehow won, she'd walk out with 1.5 million credits, which, of course, she wouldn't. Obviously. Still, I stared at her. Are you insane? She smiled for the first time, and something about that smile set every survival instinct I had screaming. It wasn't warm, it wasn't friendly, it wasn't nervous bravado. It was the smile of someone who knew something the rest of us didn't. Just process the bet, she said. So I did. What else was I supposed to do? Arena prep took another 10 minutes. Medical teams moved into position. Shield generators powered up with a sharp rising whine. The floor reconfigured itself to standard combat mode, flat, non-slip, with impact dampening zones around the edges. Rebecca stepped onto the arena floor wearing the same battered training clothes she'd arrived in. Rekar entered from the opposite side, and the crowd exploded. He raised his arms, basking in the roar, his massive frame casting a shadow that practically swallowed the human woman whole. I checked the betting totals one last time. 98% of the money was on Rekar. The remaining 2% was apparently placed by humans with either fierce loyalty or a complete lack of common sense. The referee, a Kaldorian, loaded with enough cybernetic enhancements to survive standing between these two, raised one hand. Fighters ready? Rekar cracked his knuckles. Each pop sounded like a gunshot. Ready to crush. Rebecca rolled her shoulders, bounced once on her toes. Ready. I leaned forward in my coordinator's booth, datapad forgotten. This was either going to be the shortest fight in arena history or the most interesting. The referee's hand dropped. Fight! He stopped himself and raised a hand again before either of them moved. Standard rules apply. Fight continues until knockout, submission, or medical intervention. Killing blows are prohibited and will result in immediate disqualification and criminal charges. Deliberate maiming will incur fines. He looked between them. Do both fighters understand? Yes, yes, Rekar said, waving him off without looking away from Rebecca. Understood, Rebecca replied. The referee nodded and retreated toward the edge, but he didn't signal the start just yet. There was always that moment, that stretched, breath-holding pause before violence erupted, where fighters measured each other. Some used it for strategy, others used it for intimidation. Rekar, unsurprisingly, chose intimidation. He began circling Rebecca, slow and deliberate, each heavy step thudding against the arena floor like a war drum. The sound echoed through the space, rhythmic and threatening. You know what I'm going to enjoy most, little human, he said. The sound, that crunch when your ribs collapse, the pop when your joints separate, the wet squelch when... Are you actually trying to scare me? Rebecca interrupted. Or are you just really bad at flirting? Because honestly, I can't tell. The arena erupted. Even I had to bite back a laugh, and I was supposed to be the professional here. Rekar's hide flushed even darker. You dare mock me? I mean, she said, tilting her head, studying him with that same mildly curious expression, you're kind of making it easy. Let me guess. Next, you're going to tell me how many opponents you've crushed. Then you'll flex, roar a bit, maybe pound your chest. She shrugged. Am I close? Rekar stepped forward, looming over her. At 8 feet tall, he towered over Rebecca by nearly 3 feet. His shadow completely swallowed her. I have broken warriors twice your size without effort, he snarled. I've made champions beg for mercy. What do you think you're going to accomplish here, human? What delusion brought you into my arena? Rebecca yawned. Actually yawned. Oh, sorry, she said. Were you still talking? And that's where I realized something important. Up until that moment, nobody in the galaxy really understood humans from a combat perspective, and honestly, that wasn't unreasonable. It came down to biology and planetary conditions. Most spacefaring species came from harsh worlds, high gravity, toxic air, apex predators, brutal environments. Those pressures shaped them into living weapons. Krothians evolved under 1.8 standard gravity. Vorkals shared their world with fire-breathing megafauna. Mytharians developed on a planet where the climate could flip from frozen hellscape to boiling desert in a single day. Earth? Earth was classified as a Category 4 death world, which sounds impressive, until you learn the scale goes up to 10. Earth had slightly higher gravity than average, some dangerous predators, weather that was energetic but hardly extreme by galactic standards. Humans evolved as persistence hunters and tool users, clever, adaptable, stubborn, but not especially strong, fast, or durable compared to most of us. An average human could lift their own body weight. An average Krothian could lift 5 times theirs. Humans had no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no redundant organs, no built-in weapons at all. They were soft, squishy, vulnerable. A solid punch from a Krothian could cave in a human skull. So naturally, everyone assumed this fight would last maybe 15 seconds. Rekar clearly believed that too. He stopped circling and planted himself directly in front of Rebecca, close enough that she had to crane her neck to look up at him. "Here's how this is going to go, human," he said. "I'm going to charge you," he said, voice low and confident. "You'll try to dodge, because that's what prey does, but you won't be fast enough. I'll grab you, lift you, and slam you into the floor hard enough to knock the air out of your pathetic little lungs. Then, while you're gasping and crying, I'll do it again and again until you remember your place in the natural order." "Huh?" Rebecca said. She tilted her head. "That's a lot of steps. Have you thought about just being good at fighting instead?" Vrekar's roar shook the arena. It wasn't just loud, it was primal. Pure rage, hunger, and the promise of violence wrapped into one sound. His tail lashed behind him as his claws slid out from his fingers, each one 6 inches long, molecularly sharpened bone gleaming under the arena lights. The crowd went insane. Thousands of voices screamed in anticipation. Rebecca didn't move. Her arms hung loose at her sides. Her expression didn't change. Inside his own head, Vrekar was already celebrating. This would be over in one move, one charge, one grab, one slam. The human would fold like paper. The crowd would chant his name. He'd collect his appearance fee, scoop up his winnings from the betting pools, and maybe be merciful enough not to break too many bones. Just enough to make a point. 15 seconds, he decided. 20, if she was lucky. The referee raised his hand again. "Fighters, are you ready?" Vrekar dropped into a combat stance, his massive body coiled tight, every muscle drawn back like a compressed spring. "Ready." Rebecca adjusted her stance slightly. Feet shoulder-width apart. Knees barely bent. She looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Like someone waiting for a transport instead of someone about to be hit by several 100 pounds of angry Krothian. "Ready," she said. The noise in the arena climbed to a fever pitch. People in the stands were literally shaking with excitement. Betting terminals flashed non-stop as last-second wagers poured in. The odds had somehow gotten worse. 400 to 1 against Rebecca now. The referee's hand dropped. Fight! Vriker launched himself forward with a speed that didn't seem possible for something his size. The arena floor cracked beneath the force of his push-off. His arms stretched out, claws flashing, reaching for the small human who dared to mock him. Rebecca didn't move. For one frozen heartbeat, everyone watching thought she'd given up, that she'd finally realized how badly she'd misjudged things. Then, at the very last instant, she shifted. It wasn't dramatic, just a slight turn of her hips, a small step to the left, a subtle duck of her head. But it was enough. Vriker tore past her, his claws slicing through empty air where she'd been standing a fraction of a second earlier. His momentum carried him forward, and he slammed into the arena floor with a sound like a small explosion. The crowd gasped. Rebecca turned calmly to watch him scramble back to his feet, and that smile appeared again. That knowing, dangerous smile. "Oops," she said pleasantly. "Did you trip?" Vriker's roar of fury probably echoed 3 decks away, and that's when I knew. This wasn't going to be a short fight after all. He shoved himself upright, his hide now streaked with darker patches of crimson across his shoulders and neck. In Krothian physiology, that color meant one thing: embarrassment mixed with rage, a very bad combination. "Lucky," he snarled. "That was lucky." Rebecca didn't respond. She just stood there, balanced, hands loose, waiting. Vriker charged again, but this time he adjusted. Instead of going for a full grab, he threw a heavy right hook aimed straight at her head. The punch was fast, too fast for something that big. A blur of scaled muscle and extended claws that would have taken a lesser fighter's head clean off. The air whistled as it passed. Rebecca leaned back. The strike missed by inches, close enough that the airflow made her ponytail sway. Before Vriker could pull his arm back, she stepped inside his guard and drove her fist into his ribs. 3 times. Quick, sharp jabs, precise, snapping impacts. Then she was gone, slipping back out of range before he could counter. Vriker glanced down at his side, confused. He'd felt the hits. They'd landed clean. But they hadn't hurt. Not really. It felt like being punched by a child. What is this human doing? "Stand still," he roared, advancing again, more cautiously now. "No," Rebecca said calmly, circling to his left. "I don't think I will." The crowd was still cheering for Vriker, but new sounds had crept in. Confusion, uncertainty, a few scattered laughs that weren't entirely at Rebecca's expense anymore. I checked the betting feeds. A small but noticeable number of spectators were hedging their bets now, placing cautious side wagers on the human, just in case. Vriker threw a full combination, left jab, right cross, followed by a sweeping kick that should have shattered Rebecca's legs if it connected. He was faster than most Krothians, his movements sharpened by years of professional combat. Each strike carried enough force to dent armor plating. Rebecca stepped aside from the jab. She ducked under the cross so low her knee nearly touched the floor. The kick sailed over her head. As Vriker spun with the momentum, she popped back up and struck again. This time, right where his kidney would be, if Krothians had kidneys. 4 rapid punches. Same spot, almost perfectly placed. Vriker stumbled forward, more shocked than hurt. He spun, snapping his tail around in a classic Krothian counter meant to catch opponents off guard. Rebecca jumped. actually jumped, tucked her legs like she was skipping rope, and landed in a crouch 3 feet away. "How are you doing that?" Vrecker demanded. His breathing was heavier now, not from exertion, but frustration. "How are you moving that fast?" "I'm not," Rebecca said. She wasn't even breathing hard. "You're just moving predictably." That was it. Whatever strategy Vrecker had left evaporated. He roared and went full berserker. He rushed her in a storm of motion, arms slashing so fast they blurred into claws and scales. High, low, middle, layered combinations meant to overwhelm through sheer violence. The air itself seemed to scream as his strikes cut through it, the sounds pounding through the arena like a brutal drumline. Rebecca flowed through the assault like water slipping around stone. She bobbed, she weaved, she slipped and ducked. Every attack missed by inches, sometimes less. And every time Vrecker overcommitted, every time his weight carried him just a fraction too far, she was there. A quick jab to the throat, a hook into the floating ribs, a sharp cross into the solar plexus. None of the blows looked devastating on their own, but she kept landing them in the exact same places over and over. The laughter in the stands died. The arena fell into a stunned hush, broken only by the sounds of combat, the hollow whoosh of Vrecker's attacks cutting empty air, the sharp crack of Rebecca's knuckles finding their mark, and the increasingly heavy breathing of the Krothian champion. I glanced at my datapad. 3 minutes had passed, 3 full minutes, and Vrecker hadn't landed a single clean hit. Iris leaned in close, his tentacles twitching nervously. "This shouldn't be possible." "The speed difference alone," he started. "I know," I muttered. "And the strength ratio?" "I know." "Then how is she?" "I have no idea." Down on the arena floor, Vrecker was starting to understand that something was very wrong. His strikes were losing precision, driven more by anger than skill. He was used to crushing opponents fast, ending fights before they ever had a chance to become complicated. But Rebecca refused to be rushed. She refused to be frightened. She refused to do anything except keep moving, keep striking, and keep making him look ridiculous. So Vrecker changed tactics. If precision wasn't working, he'd go for area damage. He planted his feet, pulled his massive fist back, and drove it straight into the arena floor with everything he had. The impact was enormous. The reinforced surface fractured, cracks spiderwebbing outward as a shock wave rippled across the arena, meant to knock Rebecca off balance, stun her, finally give him an opening. Rebecca had already leapt backward. She landed in a perfect 3-point stance, stable and balanced, as dust and debris rained down around her. "Nice try," she said casually. "You want to take a break? You look tired." "I am not tired," Vrecker bellowed, though his heaving chest told a different story. "I'm just getting started." He charged again, roaring. This time his arms spread wide, cutting off her escape routes. He was going to drive her into the wall, corner her. End this. Rebecca ran toward him. The crowd gasped. That was it. She'd finally made a mistake. Then she dropped. She slid across the arena floor, low and fast, her body skimming the surface. She passed cleanly between Vrecker's legs, so close her shoulder brushed his ankle. As she went by, she punched upward, straight into the base of his tail, right where Krothian nerve clusters were at their most sensitive. Vrecker howled. Pain and surprise ripped through him as his momentum carried him forward. He tried to stop, tried to turn. He couldn't. The dust from his earlier strike made the floor slick, and he was moving far too fast. He hit the arena wall, not just hit it, smashed into it. 600 pounds at full sprint slammed into the energy barrier. The shield flared bright blue, absorbing the impact and keeping him from breaking through, but the collision was still brutal. Vraca rebounded and crashed onto his back, eyes unfocused, limbs twitching. The referee rushed forward, hand raised, ready to call it. Then Vraca groaned. He rolled onto his side. Dazed? Absolutely. Humiliated? Completely. Out? Not yet. He pushed himself up onto his hands and knees, shaking his head as he tried to clear it. When he looked up, Rebecca was standing 10 feet away, hands on her hips, waiting patiently. "I have to ask," she said conversationally, "do you actually train, or do you just rely on being big and scary?" Vraca's response wasn't words. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure fury that tore out of his chest. He hauled himself upright, wobbling slightly, eyes locked on Rebecca with a ferocity that would have sent most beings running. The crowd was losing its mind. Half the arena was chanting Vraca's name, desperate for him to crush this human upstart. The other half was screaming for Rebecca, caught up in the impossible sight of a human standing toe-to-toe with a Krothian champion. I checked the fight clock. 5 minutes gone. I looked at Vraca, bleeding from a cut above his eye ridge, breathing hard, frustration written all over him. Then I looked at Rebecca. She looked like she'd just finished a light warm-up. The betting odds were shifting fast now. 300 to 1, 200 to 1, 150. People were starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, they'd been wrong about humans. Vraca wiped the blood from his face and, for the first time in the match, settled into a proper fighting stance. No theatrics, no arrogance, no assumptions. This was a real fight now. Rebecca's smile widened. "There we go," she said. "I was wondering when you'd start taking this seriously." Vraca had survived enough battles to know when adaptation was necessary. Brute force hadn't worked. Intimidation hadn't worked. Raw speed alone wasn't enough. So he fell back on what had made him a champion in the first place. Fundamentals. Technique. Reach advantage. Positioning. He began working his jab. Not wild swings, but controlled, measured strikes that used his superior arm length to keep Rebecca at bay. Each jab extended nearly 4 feet from his shoulder, forming a moving wall of scaled fist and razor-sharp claws. He mixed in low kicks aimed at her legs, trying to slow her down, trying to steal that maddening mobility. For the first time, it looked like Vraca had found an answer. Rebecca was forced to give ground, circling, searching for openings that weren't appearing as easily as before. The crowd roared its approval. This was more like it. This was the Vraca they remembered. "Finally learning, are we?" Rebecca said. There was a hint of approval in her voice, just enough to make it sound less like a taunt and more like acknowledgement. Vraca didn't answer. He was locked in now. All 4 of his eyes tracked her every micro-movement, every shift of weight. He fired another jab, then another. He started building a rhythm. When Rebecca tried to slip inside, he anticipated it and snapped a short elbow toward her head, forcing her to break off and reset. So Rebecca adjusted. Instead of trying to completely avoid his jabs, she began redirecting them. A small parry here, a subtle deflection there, barely any movement at all, just enough to knock each strike slightly off line. And with every deflection, she stepped closer, an inch at a time. Rekar threw a straight right and put real power behind it. Rebecca slapped it aside with her left hand and stepped in. Before he could pull back, She was inside his guard, too close for his reach to matter. An uppercut slammed into his ribs. A hook followed into his liver area. Then another uppercut snapped up under his chin. Fast, brutal, perfectly timed. Each strike flowed into the next, building momentum like a choreographed sequence of violence. Rekhar's head jerked back as the last blow landed. His vision blurred, and in that brief, terrifying instant, something inside him finally clicked. He might lose. The thought was so foreign, so completely outside anything he'd ever experienced, that he froze for a heartbeat just trying to process it. Me, Kharvak the Unyielding. 43 professional victories. Feared across 3 star systems. Losing to a human? Rebecca didn't give him time to think about it. She surged forward, relentless now, her fists chaining together in combinations Rekhar couldn't read or counter. Every time he tried to regain distance, she closed it. Every time he attempted to clinch and use his strength, she slipped free before he could lock her down. His breathing grew heavy. His chest heaved, lungs struggling to keep up as his muscles began to burn. Rekhar had excellent stamina under normal circumstances, but this wasn't normal. This was constant motion, constant defense, constant adjustment. He had never worked this hard in a fight. Rebecca, meanwhile, was still breathing evenly. She was sweating now, dark patches spreading across her shoulders and back, but her rhythm never broke. If anything, she seemed to be getting faster. How? Rekhar gasped between exchanges. How are you not tired? Cardio, Rebecca replied, ducking under a hook. You should try it sometime. She slammed a punch into his liver. Pain exploded through his left side, white-hot and nauseating. Rekhar grunted, his arm dropping instinctively to protect the injury. Rebecca switched targets instantly. A cross smashed into his snout. Blood burst from his nostrils, splattering across his chest scales. The arena erupted. Every being in the stands was on their feet now, screaming so loudly the sound vibrated through the station's hull. Half the crowd was chanting Rebecca's name. The betting terminals had gone completely feral, odds swinging wildly as credits poured in from both sides. Rekhar staggered backward, desperate for space, desperate for air. His legs felt heavy. His arms felt worse. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, rest, quit, survive, before permanent damage set in. But pride wouldn't allow it. He was Kharvak the Unyielding. He did not quit. He did not surrender. He would die in this arena before admitting defeat to a human. He roared, more desperation than confidence now, and charged one last time. This was it, his final gamble. Everything he had left went into one overwhelming assault meant to end the fight. Right cross, left hook, right uppercut, spinning back fist, each blow thrown with bone-shattering force. Any one of them could have finished it, if it landed. Rebecca slipped the cross by a hair. She ducked under the hook so low her knee brushed the floor. She leaned back from the uppercut, letting it pass inches from her nose. And when the spinning back fist came around, she didn't dodge. She caught it. Rekhar's eyes went wide. Rebecca's hands, small, human hands, closed around his massive wrist, stopping the strike dead. For one frozen moment, they were locked together, his power trapped in her grip. Then she twisted. She used his own momentum against him, and she threw him. A human. Throwing. A Krothian. Rekhar sailed through the air and slammed onto his back. The impact drove the last of the air from his lungs in a painful wheeze. Stars exploded across his vision. His body screamed for oxygen that wouldn't come fast enough. He tried to rise. His arms didn't respond. He tried to roll. His legs refused. His pride demanded he keep fighting. But his body had finally reached its limit. Rebecca stood over him, barely winded, fists still raised. "Stay down," she said, and for the first time there was real concern in her voice. "You fought well. There's no shame in knowing when to stop." But Rekar didn't hear her. All he could hear was the roaring in his ears, the pounding of his heart, the desperate rasp of his lungs. Darkness crept in from the edges of his vision. Still, through sheer stubborn will, he managed to get one hand under himself. He pushed. His arm shook violently. The crowd went silent. Kharvak the Unyielding would not quit. Could not quit. Even if it killed him, he would rise. He forced himself up onto his knees, every muscle screaming. And Rebecca's fist came down one final time. Blood dripped from his snout onto the arena floor, each drop splashing into a little red puddle that caught the glare of the lights above. I watched his eyes go glassy, split into two images, then slowly pull themselves back together as he forced his focus. Rebecca had already stepped away, giving him space to stand. From where I sat, I could almost hear the thought forming in his head through the pain and exhaustion. He thought she'd made a mistake. Worse, he thought it was one he could use, one last opening, one final roll of the dice. Krothians had a move for moments like this, something they almost never used because of how much it cost them. They called it the devastation rush. It was a full berserker surge, dumping every scrap of strength and stamina into about 5 seconds of pure violence. Fighters who used it either won in spectacular fashion or collapsed the instant it was over. There was no in-between. Rekar dragged in a deep breath, blood thick on his tongue. I could see the adrenaline hit him like a switch flipping. His posture tightened, his eyes sharpened. The noise of the arena faded for him even as it roared around us. Later, he would say he could hear everything in that moment. Individual voices in the crowd, Rebecca's calm breathing, even his own heart's pounding in his chest like war drums. Then he launched himself forward. The devastation rush lived up to its name. Rekar turned into a storm of motion, claws, fists, elbows, knees, even his tail whipping through the air. He came from every angle at once, moving with a speed and savagery that didn't seem possible for something that big and already half dead on its feet. The air cracked around his strikes. Even from the stands I felt it. Rebecca's eyes went wide. This wasn't the same fight anymore. This was dangerous. She blocked a claw, slipped a knee, redirected an elbow, but there were too many strikes coming too fast. One claw raked her shoulder, tearing her training gear and drawing the first real blood I'd seen from her. A tail strike smashed into her hip and knocked her sideways. A punch she barely managed to deflect still numbed her arm. The crowd lost its mind. This was the Rekar they worshipped, the unstoppable monster, the walking weapon. He pushed harder, faster, pouring everything he had left into that final assault. His vision started to close in again, but he didn't care. He didn't need long. He just needed one clean hit, one solid shot to a human skull, and it would all be over. He threw a massive right hand, a wild haymaker loaded with every ounce of strength he had left. The punch came in like a meteor, fast, brutal, and fully committed. Rebecca didn't step back. She didn't sidestep. She dropped, straight down into a full squat, so fast and so low that his punch screamed over her head. Rekar's own momentum carried him forward, past his balance, past control. For half a heartbeat, He was completely open. Rebecca came up like a released spring. Her whole body coiled and then exploded upward. Her fist drove into his chin with terrifying precision, timed perfectly so his own forward motion doubled the impact. The sound cracked through the arena like a gunshot. Vrekar's head snapped back. All four of his eyes rolled up. His legs simply shut off. He was unconscious before gravity finished the job. 600 pounds of Krothian warrior tipped backward in slow motion, arm slack, tail limp, then slammed into the floor with a thunderous crash that rattled the booth I was sitting in. The referee sprinted in, arms waving, shouting the call. Knockout, knockout. Winner by knockout. Elena Navarro. And the crowd exploded. I don't mean cheered, I mean erupted. The noise was so intense the station's structural alarms flickered on for a moment. Half the arena screamed in stunned disbelief. The other half either lost their minds with joy or stood frozen, staring at something they couldn't process. Rebecca stood over Vrekar's unmoving body, breathing hard now, her fist still raised. Then she lowered it, rolled her shoulders, and walked back to her corner like she'd just finished a routine sparring match. The medical teams flooded the floor, scanners and gear appearing from nowhere. As for Vrekar, he was gone, completely out. When he finally came to, the first thing he felt was pain. Not sharp pain, not focused pain, just pain everywhere at once, a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to fill his entire body. His head felt like it had been used as a drum. His ribs hurt. His jaw hurt. Even parts of him he didn't know could hurt were lighting up his nerves. The second thing he noticed was the light, bright, white, sterile, burning his eyes as he tried to open them. The third thing was a voice, familiar, amused, doing a terrible job of not laughing. "Oh, good. You're awake. Welcome back to the land of the conscious, champion." Vrekar managed to crack his eyes open. He was in a medical bay, stretched out on a reinforced bed built for heavy species. Monitors clung to his chest and head. An IV fed something into his arm that dulled the pain just enough to keep him sane. A Reliant medic stood beside him, compound eyes glittering with barely contained amusement. She pretended to focus on her data pad, but she kept glancing at him like he was the funniest thing she'd seen all cycle. His mouth was dry. His tongue felt thick. He worked his jaw, winced, and croaked out the only question that mattered. "Who won?" The medic broke. She tried to hold it together. She really did. But the laughter burst out of her like a ruptured tank. She laughed so hard she had to set the data pad down. Other medics nearby looked over, and a few of them started chuckling too. Oh, that's perfect," she managed between laughs. "That is absolutely perfect. You seriously don't remember?" The confusion must have shown on his face, because she finally took pity on him. She tapped her data pad, and a hollow display bloomed into the air above his bed. "Here," she said, still fighting another wave of laughter. "Maybe this will help." The hollow screen played it all back without mercy. It showed the arena. It showed him throwing that last desperate charge. It showed Rebecca dropping low. It showed the uppercut that shut him off like a switch. It showed him crashing down like a building being torn apart. The replay froze on Rebecca, standing tall, while he lay sprawled out cold on the floor. Vrekar stared at the image for a long time. You could almost see his mind trying to catch up. Between the concussion and whatever painkillers were pumping through him, his brain just couldn't quite accept what his eyes were telling it. "I lost," he said slowly, like he was testing whether the words were even real. "I lost to a human." "You did," the medic replied, her tone gentle even though the smile hadn't fully left her face. "And I'll be honest, it was spectacular. The fight is already trending across 6 systems. You're famous now." She paused, then added, "Just not in the way you were probably hoping." Rekar closed his eyes. "I expected rage. I expected humiliation, maybe even despair. But mostly, what I saw was exhaustion. And something else, too. Curiosity." "Where is she?" he asked. The medic flicked her hand and brought up another screen, this one showing the public concourse outside the arena. "Last I checked, she was collecting her winnings, 1.5 million credits." She tilted her head. "Apparently, she bet on herself." The screen showed Rebecca at a payout terminal, surrounded by cheering humans and a mixed crowd of aliens who had clearly made a fortune betting on the impossible. She was smiling, shaking hands, looking like she'd just wrapped up a good day's work instead of knocking out one of the most feared fighters in the galaxy. "How?" Rekar murmured, mostly to himself. "How did she do that?" The medic brought up another display, this one filled with text and images. "Her registration file," she said. "According to this, she's a former military combat instructor from Earth, specialized in something called mixed martial arts." She scrolled. "She's also trained in about a dozen other human fighting styles with names I can barely pronounce. Boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling." She stopped scrolling and looked at him. "Apparently, back on Earth, she's considered average." "Average?" Rekar repeated, stunned. The medic nodded. "Humans may be physically weaker than most species, but they've been fighting each other for their entire evolutionary history. They've turned violence into a craft, all that aggression, all that creativity." She let the words sink in. Thousands of years of warfare refined into techniques that don't depend on raw strength. She met his eyes, and this time there was real sympathy there. "You weren't beaten by better genetics, Rekar. You were beaten by better skill." He lay there staring up at the ceiling, letting it all process. Somewhere deep inside him, his ego was screaming bloody murder. But underneath that, stronger than it had any right to be, was something else. Respect. "I want a rematch," he said suddenly. The medic burst out laughing again. "Not for at least 3 months." She started counting on her fingers. 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, a fractured jaw, and enough bruising to paint a small ship. She smiled at him. "You're going to be here a while, champion." Rekar managed a weak grin, even though it hurt like hell. 3 months, then. Tell her. Tell the human." He swallowed. 3 months? And we fight again." The medic shook her head, clearly amused. "Oh, I can't wait to see that. The galaxy is going to lose its mind." On the nearby screen, Rebecca was being interviewed. The audio was muted, but you didn't need sound to read her body language. Calm, confident, professional. When the reporter apparently asked if she'd fight Rekar again, she just shrugged and smiled. Watching that, something finally clicked for him. Something that probably should have been obvious from the start. Humans weren't weak. They were underestimated. And now he understood that they liked it that way. Rekar closed his eyes as the medication pulled him back toward sleep. His last thought before drifting off was strangely upbeat. Next time would be different. Next time he'd be ready. Next time he'd know what he was facing. But buried under the fog and the exhaustion, A quiet little voice whispered a truth he wasn't quite ready to admit. Next time, he'd probably lose again. And somehow, that didn't bother him nearly as much as it should have.